From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Good Sunday afternoon. Welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Kate Walsh. On Tuesday, November 8th, we as voters in Massachusetts have big decisions to make. Of course, we will be electing a new president, but we'll also ask several ballot questions and answer them at the polls. Today on 22 News in Focus, we hope to inform you on Ballot Question 2, known as an act to allow fair access to public charter schools. A yes vote supports this proposal to authorize up to 12 new charter schools or enrollment expansions in existing charter schools by the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education per year. A no vote opposes this proposal to authorize up to 12 new charter schools or enrollment expansions in existing charter schools. So joining us today are experts passionate on both sides of this question. Representing Yes on 2 is Bill Spire. He's the founder and head of Springfield Prep Charter School. Representing Save Our Public Schools, which is against Question 2, is Dr. Todd Gazda, the superintendent of Ludlow Public Schools. So thank you both for being here today talking about this important issue. Before we get into what charter schools are and what this ballot question really means, we want to find out a little bit about the both of you and your professional experience. So could we start with you, Bill, and
Sure.
tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I started my career as a public district school teacher in New York City, and I taught high school for a number of years in a traditional district public school environment at two different schools. And then I took, and then I ended up going to law school, and I was a child welfare lawyer in Massachusetts. And what I found myself finding through that work was just that the schools are very powerful places. You can really impact families and communities in a powerful way through schools. And when I started looking to get back from the legal profession into schools, the only place I'd ever worked was in a district school environment. But I had seen the power of charter schools because of the autonomy that they have. And so I ended up working to found a charter school and founding Springfield Prep because we could have a mission that was near and dear to my heart. We could really target low-income communities, urban communities through our work, and also had the autonomy to be innovative and to make sure that we were serving our kids in the best possible way.
All right, Dr. Todd Gazda, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, it's kind of interesting that you have actually two attorneys sitting on this stage. Before going into public education, I was an attorney practicing corporate litigation down in New York City. And I did that for about 4 years before I decided that wasn't the life I really wanted for myself. And so I moved back here to Western Mass, back to my hometown, or right next door, and went into teaching. And I taught 8th grade history for a couple years, and then went to the high school and taught high school history and English before going into administration, and then becoming an assistant principal and doing that for a couple of years. And then when the principal retired, I became principal of that middle school. And also have some experience my last year and a half as middle school principal. I also took over a local elementary school right near us, and so I was principal of both, giving me experience K through 12 in our public school system. I also went back to school and got my master's in educational administration, and I just finished my doctorate a little over a year ago in educational leadership from the University of Hartford.
All right, so believe it or not, this is a ballot question, but a lot of people don't know what a charter school really is. Of course, they've heard about it. They hear that there's wait lists for it, so maybe it's a good thing, but they don't know what it is. So could you describe to us basics of what a charter school is?
Yeah, and I find that very frequently that people are confused about what charters are. A charter school is a public school. I think that's the most important thing that viewers understand. We are an independent public school. We essentially exchange more autonomy than some district schools have for accountability. And what that means is that we follow all the laws that district schools follow in Massachusetts. We're accountable for results. We take the MCAS or the PARC depending on the year that the test is given. And we serve all students with disabilities, English language learners. We accept students by a random lottery. So students fill out a one-page application, parents fill out a one-page application, and we pick out of a bowl, and that's how it works. It's not some mysterious thing, and I think that's the most important thing that people understand is that both of us here on stage are clearly passionate about helping kids, and this shouldn't be an us versus them kind of thing. Charters have some unique powers because of the autonomy that we're provided. But at the end of the day, we're serving the same kids, and there's many more similarities than there are differences.
But how do the differences impact a traditional public school district?
It's a complex question in that it really is one of those situations where the devil is in the details. Everything that Bill just said is 100% factually accurate. But in between the facts is where the distinctions lie. These examples, Bill said that they take all students, and they do. If you look at the demographics in his school, there are, the representations of low-income students are there. There are special education students, but when you dig a little deeper into those numbers, it's those distinctions that become apparent. Questions I would ask are, what are the needs of those special education students? How many students that qualify for special education in your charter school have substantial needs or are on the autism spectrum? Those kind of distinctions, those are students that we serve that if they come to his school, he would not be able to meet their needs. And so where do they end up is back in the traditional public school setting.
And I think that is something that is an argument that you hear a lot. And I think it's important to say that because of that argument, there has been study after study after study from MIT just came out with one a year ago, I believe, that looked at special education service provision in charter schools and district schools and said that when you actually look at the numbers, charters are serving very high numbers of special education students and are serving them better, frankly, than many of the district schools. So I think, in our school, we have a very, very broad range of student need. There is some truth, I think, in the fact that we are a small school. And so we have under 200 students now. We're growing over time to be almost 500. But charters have, I think, over the past 20 years or so, have struggled because with such small populations, it's hard to have the specialized staffing that you need. And because of that argument, the charter movement has been really responsive to that, and there's actually a collaboration here in Western Mass where charter schools are pooling resources to try to better serve some of the very specialized cases that are difficult to serve, that the superintendent is right, that are difficult to serve.
So are you saying you might have a special needs teacher who works with just one student, let's say at one charter school, but will go to another one to help?
In theory, that's the thought, is that as you build collaboratives, just like rural districts have built collaboratives to provide services that are hard for a very small town to provide, that charter schools can band together and do that. And we already work with a number of charter schools we're trying to build that up. I think the most important thing, though, is that we are serving students with some pretty significant needs. And I would invite anyone to our school to see that. And the devil is in the details, and the detail, I think, for us is that we provide 2 teachers in every classroom because we know students do have different needs in the classroom. And we provide a lot of very intensive supports in the early years, what in education you call tier 1 and 2 interventions. So in the early years, and then also just these tier 1 and 2 interventions to make sure kids are getting supported, no matter what their needs are.
But is it? Yeah,
I applaud the work and I applaud the idea of collaboration across charter school districts, but right now, at this time, we have what is developing, which is a 2-tiered system of education, where some students just cannot have their needs met in charter schools, so those students must be retained in the public school setting. That's what we have. That's the fact. And it's overcoming that creates some of this discord. As a traditional public school administrator, We serve every student in our town, regardless of their need, regardless of their health, regardless of their social emotional needs, regardless of their disability. We serve them. We provide them with a quality public education. If we cannot, what we do is we find the appropriate setting for those students, and we ensure that they get the services they need. I would ask how many students that you pay for are at out-of-district placements.
It's a little bit of a tough question. We are such a brand new school. We're literally in our first year and 2 months of operation. So last year was our first operational year.
Yeah.
And so at this point we are not paying for anyone to have an out-of-district placement. But again, I think because we're only a year old, that might be an atypical situation. I think that what's really important is, I'd love to comment on two things. One is that this idea of a two-tiered system is something that we're hearing a lot. I'm hearing a lot. There is a two-tiered system that exists, and that is families that have the means to move to more affluent districts or send their children to parochial or private schools, and then others who are left in school districts that frankly are not meeting their needs. I heard something recently that really, really shocked me, that in Massachusetts, 50% of all urban students are in schools that the state itself deems underperforming. So 1 out of every 2 students in an urban district in a city is in a school that is deemed underperforming. And so that's not okay. And I would argue that that is the two-tier system. That the two-tier system has nothing to do with charter versus district. It's those who have the means to move to certain districts and those who don't. And that's really what charters are trying to do. They're trying to provide options to families. The other thing I wanted to comment on is that because, again, these issues are hotly contested and debated, there's a lot of scrutiny on charter schools. There's there's a very robust accountability mechanism in place. Some say the best in the country in Massachusetts. And it's illegal for us to exclude students. And there are many different mechanisms for families to complain if a school were to do that, but we serve all kids who come to us. We are no different than a district. In fact, we are a district. Technically, we are our own school district, and we follow all the same laws and regulations that a traditional district does.
All right, and we'll continue talking about that. You can have your chance for a rebuttal as well, but we're going to take a quick break, and after the break, we'll hear more about that, and we'll also talk about funding of charter schools. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about Ballot Question 2, raising the cap on charter schools in Massachusetts. Each of the campaigns have differing opinions on funding. Ballot supporters say public schools do not lose money and are reimbursed for students who go to charter schools. Opponents say millions of dollars are taken away from school districts when they have to pay for students to go, as well as pay for their busing. Some communities have had to increase taxes to support their schools. So we're going to talk about funding of charter schools in a moment, but first we wanted to give you, Dr. Gaza, a chance to have a rebuttal, so to speak.
And there were 2 points that I just wanted to respond to with regards to Bill's comments. And the first is with regards to accountability. The accountability to which a charter school system is held and a public school system, a traditional public school system, they're apples and oranges. When you take a look at the accountability that I as a superintendent have to work under, I am accountable to my school committee. I am accountable through the budgetary process to my finance committee in my town, the budget committee subcommittee in my town, the board of selectmen in my town, and then finally to the town meeting members as they vote to approve my school budget. If I do not account step by step through that process for how we are spending every penny, I will be directly held accountable. When it comes to charter schools, that accountability is at the Department of Education in Malden. That's a big difference. In her 2014 report, Massachusetts State Auditor Bump pointed out that that process itself was flawed and that the department wasn't doing as good a job as they should in holding these charter schools accountable. So the fact that this is one of the best accountability systems in the country, according to Bill, That's concerning, because if this is the best in the shape that it's in, as pointed out by our state auditor, then the rest of the country really needs to take a look at what they're doing. Second of all was with respect to this idea of a two-tiered educational system. You know, charter school advocates always push for this idea of choice, this idea that families deserve the best education for their children. This will dovetail nicely into the financial discussion. I agree completely and totally that every child deserves a quality public education in the community in which they reside. I agree parents should have a choice on how their children should be educated. Unfortunately, in this discussion, a very important choice is being overlooked, and that is the choice of a parent to send their children to a traditional public school setting that is fully funded and has all of the resources necessary to meet the needs of those student populations. That's where this discussion really comes to a head, is the more students leave a traditional public school setting into a charter school setting, drains resources from that community. And we find this most dramatically in our urban school settings. So we truly are looking to set up a system between the haves and have-nots. Not necessarily with respect to income per se, but by the nature and act of effectively enrolling their student in a charter school, their child in a charter school, those parents are more involved in their children's lives and education. Time after time, what is demonstrated in the public school system is that students whose parents are involved do better in school. So what we end up with is those engaged students with very active parents being pulled out of the public school setting and going to a charter school. Why? Well, because of this narrative that public schools are failing. Public schools are not failing our children. It's our representatives and those setting the policies that are failing our public schools. That's where the change needs to occur.
And before we get into funding, just for people who aren't familiar with charter schools, I think we need to touch on one more thing first about how students get into charter schools. It's a lottery system. And I believe I saw the latest statistics here. It said 35,000 families are on wait lists across the Commonwealth for their kids to get into.
But even those numbers have been questioned by, once again, Auditor Bump, saying that the numbers reflected in those wait lists aren't accurate, that they express duplication with children who appear on multiple lists, and that there's really a question as to exactly how many are on those wait lists.
So I think there's I don't even know where to start right now. There's I think the first thing is that the wait list, again, we are talking maybe a few thousand seats are disputed out of 32,000. So whether it's 30,000 or 32,000 or 25,000, that is a lot of families who are seeking better options. We should applaud them. We should not be demonizing them or anybody who's trying to give kids a better education in any way. We should be applauding everyone who's working for a better future for their kids or in schools. I think this idea of funding is definitely at the heart of this. I would be happy any day to join you in advocating for more public education funding. But this is not about that. There was a recent study that just came out last week, and the Boston Globe cited it in an editorial and said there is no evidence that district funding is being decreased. That actually over the past 5 years, or over the past number of years, funding has increased. And so what we see is
to the district and charter schools, or to the
per pupil spending has increased. So districts are saying, well, charters are taking money. That is just not supported by evidence. In fact, districts have been, per pupil tuition has been increasing. And then I think we have to get to this fundamental point that when a student, what Massachusetts cares about in their funding formula is funding public education. And they have what many consider to be one of the most equitable funding formulas in the country. When a student leaves one public school to go to another, whether it's to go from Springfield to Ludlow or Springfield to Springfield Prep, that funding follows the student. Now, when a student moves from Springfield to Ludlow, the funding moves to Ludlow. Springfield doesn't get anything. And that, frankly, that happens a lot because families are moving when they're moving in efforts to find the best schools.
And is this through the tax money that they then pay into a different town, or specifically following that student?
It's part of a formula that that combines local money and state aid. But that per pupil tuition, that money follows the student from one town or city to another. But because of the the charter schools are rare in that funding actually is reimbursed to a district. So when a student leaves Springfield and comes to Springfield Prep gets a per pupil tuition that would have gone to Springfield. So that's true, they lose that money. But they're also not educating that child. And like I said before, they're getting reimbursed 225%. So in the first year, we get our per pupil tuition, and the Springfield district, even though they're no longer educating that student, gets the per pupil tuition. That happens again for the second year, and for another 4 more years. So and that's the most generous reimbursement in the country. So I'm not sure that it really makes a whole lot of sense to taxpayers to pay multiple districts when multiple districts aren't educating the student. Now, it does take some time to shift operational costs, and that's fair, and so that's why districts are reimbursed. But this idea that it's going to just drain funding is just not supported.
As Bill said, I'm having trouble trying to figure out exactly what parts to respond to. And let me start out by responding to the fact that I do not fault a parent for making a decision that they feel is in the best interest of their child. I fault the system that has failed the public school system by not providing adequate resources. When you talk about the resources provided to public education, the Foundation Review Commission that did last year reviewed our funding system here for education in Massachusetts, found that it was billions of dollars underfunded. And so we are not providing the funding necessary to drive appropriate public education in all localities in our Commonwealth. Were that the case, then you would see those wait lists decrease as people were happy with the education that, once again, all students in the community were getting. When it comes to this idea of wait lists, in Ludlow, we have a wait list of 350 students for school choice in our district. This fluctuates, in any given year, but we have the same wait list that a charter school has, same type. Now, also, when it comes to this idea that, see, now I lost my spot. There's so many things going on right now.
I'd love to ask just a question. So
there it goes.
The school choice, so there's a family trying to find a better option for their child, just like they would in a charter school. So why don't you say, well, we're not going to accept that student or those funds because they should stay with the district.
That
we
is
do
an
not want
excellent
to take
choice. And
money
quite
from
frankly,
another district.
I don't fault you for taking advantage of the system that we have. I fault the system itself for being in the place. I'd be more than willing to give up school choice, and you'll find this true in many districts because it does drain resources from some locales and give it to others. But this is the system we have, and we don't have a choice but to take advantage of it.
We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. We're going to continue that conversation and talk more about funding because I do have more questions about that viewers, I'm sure, also want to know before they make this important decision on Election Day. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about charter schools because that will be an important question you'll have to answer on Election Day. It's Ballot Question 2. It's asking you if you are willing to increase the number of charter schools in Massachusetts. Joining us are both representatives from both sides of the issue. We were just having a little bit of a start of a heated conversation about charter schools and traditional public schools. I asked briefly about funding, but we are going to get into that a little bit more. But I'll give you a chance to talk about the funding issue here. With
respect to funding, it directly impacts the communities where these students are drawn from. Here in Ludlow, we have 27 students who attend charter schools. That's what we were assessed with in FY17. Now, does this come out of my school district budget? No, it does not. This is a direct assessment to the towns through their cherry sheets. The cost for those 27 students leaving our district is $591,000 in FY17. So this isn't a little amount. With our, our budget's approximately just for the school side about $30 million. So this is a decent sized chunk of money.
Would that amount of money cover them and their education through their 12 or so years in the school system, or would it cover
No, this
more
is per,
than
this is per year. This isn't.
Okay.
So when Bill says that we get a reimbursement for this from the state, he is correct. We are reimbursed from the state. As I said, the cost going out is $591,000. The reimbursement for the state is $124,000. So you have a net loss of $467,000 going out of our district. That is a direct drain on the resources of our community. Those resources could be applied to our public schools. Now, this idea that we can somehow reduce our spending by that amount just isn't plausible, because those 27 students aren't in one grade. They're spread out over K through 12. So if I lose 2 students in 5th grade, I can't reduce a teacher. So reducing costs by the amount of students when they're spread out over a school system like that just does not end up balancing out with the funds that are going out.
And does all that money go directly to your charter school if those 29 students, let's say, all happen to go to your charter school?
The funds they follow the student, yeah. And I think that I don't want to lose sight of the goal of the ballot initiative, and really the charter school movement over the past 17 years. It's all been focused on big cities. It's all been focused on cities where the need is the greatest. So frankly, Ludlow hasn't, I don't believe, has met their cap. So this ballot initiative likely doesn't impact Ludlow over the short term. What this does is mostly impacts bigger cities like a Springfield, like a Holyoke, like a Boston, where families want the option, where they've already reached their cap, and where they're in the lowest 25% performing districts in the state. So I think that's a really important thing, is bigger districts can much more easily shift resources, allocate resources differently, and that's part of what we do. That's part of running government efficiently. That's part of running companies efficiently. It's true. No one wants to lose those resources, but it is very reasonable over 6 years to right-size your operations and make sure that you're meeting student needs. And again, it's not a decrease in money. Per pupil tuition has gone up across the state. So there's not a decrease in funds.
Would you say that it would divide a big city, though, if there were, if you think that a charter school, let's say, is better than a traditional public school, and these families brought their students into the charter school because they thought it was better, would you say that it does cause that divide? What
we see, and again, what I'm talking about is my day-to-day experience running a school. What we see are families of all types who want to give their kid a great education. Those are families whose door we knocked on with an application in our outreach efforts. They're families whose cousin or family friend told them about this school. They're families whose Head Start program that we did an information session at said this might be a good option. They are families like any other families. We have not seen any division. What I think is, at the end of the day, every parent, no matter where they're from, no matter what level of income, they want the best school for their child. And frankly, I don't think parents care a whole lot whether it's charter or district. They want good schools.
That I will agree with, and they deserve good schools.
Would you say, though, that let's just assume, or in this circumstance, say that charter schools may have advantage in having a different learning model that may not be as constricted by the state, let's say. Why wouldn't the public schools take some of those lessons that the charter schools may be great at teaching and following and put it into their system as well? Why does there have to be this divide?
We do. But really, it's almost, I'm backed up with 3 points I need to make here. And the first was because we were having a discussion about raising the cap. And one, if that cap was raised and more charter schools were allowed to open in Springfield, yes, it would have an impact in Ludlow because we are within the catchment basin for the Springfield charter schools.
It depends on the
school.
Some schools are citywide, so we only accept students from Springfield, but there are regional charter schools. Correct. But not every charter school is regional.
So does that make the cap confusing?
a little?
I don't think it makes it that confusing. I think that it's just that there's two types of schools. One type says we're going to accept students from Ludlow and Chicopee and Springfield.
Okay.
And another type, like ours, says we are
Just
only
city.
only accepting students from Springfield unless there aren't enough applicants. But as you know from the wait list, there are always enough applicants.
Now, the second point, and this is, what's really driving this increase in the cap, and it really comes back to the narrative that public schools are failing their students, particularly in our urban communities. And it really, I take exception to this idea that a charter school that has not even been conceptualized is determined by our executive branch currently in Massachusetts to be inherently superior to a public school setting. It's just by the nature of being a charter school, they seem to assert that it is inherently better than a public school, and I think that's the narrative that needs to change. And it comes back to the resources, but I'll let that issue go for a bit. And I also want to make a revelation here. I am not anti-charter. I think charter schools have a place within our public school system. I think traditionally, as public schools were, or as charter schools were originally envisioned, as an area to serve specific populations of students, to fill gaps in our current educational system. There are some charter schools, I think, that do that very well. One that jumps right to mind is the Pioneer Valley Performing Arts School up in Hadley. I have, as a middle school principal, I actually lobbied to get students into that school. There wasn't many over my time as an administrator, but there were some where I knew that environment would fit that kid. And so that was the best place for them to go and continue their education. Another example is, and I'm not really proficient in understanding this school, but my understanding is the Phoenix charter schools here in Springfield serve an at-risk population. Students who are in danger of dropping out, and because they're the flexibility afforded to them in the creation of their schools, that's a school that targets a specific population that they can serve better than the traditional public school setting. So those are examples where charter school works. But this idea of we're just going to raise the cap by 12 schools a year, which there's no limit to how long that will continue out, well, what we're doing is essentially looking to replace the public school system with a charter school system.
We're going to take a break and we'll be right back. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. We have been talking about November's statewide ballot question 2 on the expansion of charter schools in Massachusetts. If you vote yes, you are voting for 12 more charter schools each year and a lift in the cap of the amount of students who will be able to go to charter schools that already exist. If you vote no, you're voting against that and keeping it kind of the way it is right now. We were talking about charter schools, the funding of them, how they work, but also filling the gap in a community, and you both have kind of agreed in urban environments in particular, so we'll get back on that.
Sure, and I just wanted to comment about this idea. Some of the schools that were raised are doing really exceptional work. I'm in total agreement about that. I'll go back to the statistic that I think is really striking, that 1 in 2 students in urban districts are in schools that the state itself, through their accountability system, is deeming underperforming. So 50% of students are in schools that are underperforming in cities across the state. I would argue that that is an enormous gap. That right there you're saying that 1 out of every 2 students is going to be limited in their life potential because of the schools they attend. That's not fair. That's an enormous gap. And that's the gap that we're trying to help to close at Springfield Prep, and that I think most charter schools are. Again, in the past 17 years, I think there's been only 2 schools that have been approved that aren't in cities. So this is really about meeting a need in cities, and this idea that 12 schools a year into forever it's really that's sort of a doomsday scenario. I think that we're hearing. From the opposition to the ballot initiative. What I think is important to understand is that the state, that you're required to go through a very rigorous application process, and the state only approves on average 3 to 4 a year, and the ballot initiative doesn't change that. That's really what likely looking at over the course of time, with the exception that it gives cities where they're already at the cap the opportunity to expand.
And I just would like to follow up and comment on that, because quite frankly, I like the fact that Bill keeps bringing up that statistic, because it makes my point exactly. I'll accept the fact that, I'll accept, for the moment, for the sake of argument, that the statistic is right, that 1 out of every 2 students in an urban school setting is in a failing school.
That's the Department of Education's number.
Yeah, so I accept that, and I believe you. That's my point. That is unacceptable. What we need to do is fully fund those schools and give them the resources to get out of that situation. So, because those schools serve every student in that community, regardless of need. And so the more we can take care and build up and strengthen those public schools in urban school settings, the better off we're going to be. So that is the point you keep making, and I agree.
But what parents...
But I would like to follow up with one last point on that topic, is the fact that more and more schools are called upon to do a social service function for our communities. It's time to, we talk about the social emotional needs of our students. The state is rolling out additional new social emotional learning standards. What we're not seeing is the resources following those. We're not seeing thoughtful coordination between the state agencies, public education, DCEF, Department of Mental Health, that can work to support students in the public school setting to ensure that their needs are met. Unless we can take care of the social emotional needs of our student population, and that's more resources than the schools currently have, we can't get to the academics. And until we start having those larger discussions about transformational change within the system, those gaps will still remain. So we need both the resources as well as coordination between those agencies.
And you're saying the resources are being shifted to charter schools if the
Not
cap was
exclusively,
lifted.
they're also grossly underfunded.
So I think we have to talk about this, though. Massachusetts has some of the highest per pupil funding for education in the country. Boston per pupil tuition is the highest of any city in the country. We are, I would absolutely love to see more funding for education. I agree. There are lots of needs that schools are being asked to meet. But this is not about a lack of resources. Charter schools have proven time and time again that they are doing the job. There are some phenomenal district schools that are doing the job as well. But this is not solely a funding issue. And so we talk about, well, why a charter school? And I started by talking about autonomy. So we know, for example, that and research backs this up, that more focused instructional time benefits kids who are historically underperforming. So at Springfield Prep, we have a longer school day. Our students are in school from 7:35 to 4 p.m. It's a long day. That is an innovation. People say, well, where's the innovation? That in itself is an innovation that charters have pushed. That is helping to get results. And those are really important things. We're not saying that it's not hard work. We're not saying that we wouldn't like more resources. We're saying we need to meet the needs of families and kids, and we're going to do it.
And you both have different ways of going about that. We're going to take a break again. We'll be right back. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Watching 22 News in Focus. Today we've been talking about Ballot Question 2, an effort to increase the number of charter schools in Massachusetts. Now, if you were to look online, let's say, and do your research about this ballot question in particular, in the language it describes a charter school as either a nonprofit or for-profit means of funding the charter school in addition to tax money. So can you talk about how these charter schools are really funded and the different types? There's, for example, the Sabas network of charter schools as one that comes to mind. Yeah,
I'm not sure that I'm not sure that it ever talks about them being a for-profit. Because I think that's really important to understand. These are public schools. We're all public schools. So the all schools are. We talked a little bit about governance before. Just as a superintendent of a district is accountable to a board and to finance committees and governance committees, I am as well, and then we're accountable to the state as well. So there's a lot of accountability there. But these are schools that are publicly funded. they can raise money just like any district can raise money. Private fundraising dollars, that's absolutely something that charters do and that districts do as well. In the instance of Sabas, what you've mentioned in Holyoke and in Springfield and in one other school across the state, what's happened is a nonprofit board, again, that's public, accountable to the state, has hired a company to run the school. But that's only 3 out of 72 charter schools across the state. So it's definitely the exception rather than the rule. But even then, they've gotten great results, and they have some impressive results, and they are still public and fully accountable to the state.
So what would be the alternative? The companies kind of help the state run those schools. In your situation,
in our situation, the board has hired me and my leadership team under me to run the school. And so I don't represent a company.
And
whereas at Sabas, there's a company that's been hired that has run schools all across the country and around the world, actually. But again, they could hire and fire that company at any point, and that is up to the public board to choose.
Have you heard anything from teachers and teachers unions about that part of a charter school, the fact that there might be companies helping to run a school in the state?
You know, it's always troubling when it makes you wonder where the money is coming from, and you know, sometimes it's difficult to track down. You know, when you look at this ballot initiative that's currently before us in Massachusetts, when you see millions and millions of dollars pouring in from out-of-state organizations to support raising the cap, it makes you wonder what the financial incentive is to accomplish that. And so it does raise a question, particularly when you see the lopsidedness of the funding, where you know the yes campaign, if you will, has more than twice the funding of the no campaign, primarily because that no campaign is grassroots. I mean, at this point, it's over 150 school committees across the state have passed resolutions in opposition to raising this cap on charter schools. So, you know, all of this, it's all part and parcel of the same discussion, really.
So I think that again, there's been a lot of talk about that. I think that's a very misleading, that the message that this is somehow privatizing education, or that no one knows where the dollars are, is very misleading.
Because that is what a lot of people do think.
It's very misleading, and I think it's very unfair. So there's a broad coalition of groups that have been supporting education reform. They're philanthropists. There's no financial incentive. We have philanthropic dollars that have supported us. No one's getting a return on that investment. There's no profit incentive here. And on the other side, so there's this coalition of groups, parent groups, students advocacy groups, and philanthropies supporting the pro-charter movement. On the no side, it's one group. It's the teachers union. It's very clear where that's coming from, but this is not a small group. I mean, the teachers unions are among the most powerful players in political campaigns in the country. There's a tremendous amount of power and money that the teachers union wields, and these are. It is very clear where that's coming from. And it's also very clear there's no hidden money anywhere. There's no profit motive.
And
that's just
to clarify, the teachers at charter schools are not in teachers unions, correct?
They could be.
Okay.
Most aren't, but they could be.
They could join the MTA?
No, they could create their own union,
Okay.
but yeah.
And that's really part of this discussion. That's, you know, it's never explicitly mentioned. It's always an undercurrent to conversations, as it was with Bill's statement right there, this fact of teachers unions, and that they are an impediment to change, and that charter schools, you know, without explicitly saying it, always, you know, hold that fact up that, you know, their teachers typically are non-union, and that, you know, they see that as a good thing. You know, quite frankly, I do not see the teachers union as an impediment to change. When engaged in a thoughtful discussion, they are educational professionals that care about their students. That's why they went into this profession. Are they resistant to some of the inappropriate reforms that they feel are being handed down and mandated by the state and federal levels? Of course they are. And as an administrator, a non-union administrator, so am I. So are many superintendents and principals across this state.
And why would teachers find it maybe an advantage not to be in a union?
Yeah,
Real quick.
I think this is at the end of the day, teachers choose to work at a school like ours because they feel respected, because they feel like their profession is valued, because they're given time to collaborate, because they're given a lot of support. And that's something that's really important. So this idea that all these mandates are being handed down. Now, at a charter school, we're still accountable for results, but we have autonomy to do what we think is right for kids. And so we determine our school day. I was speaking about the extended school day. We determine that based on what we think is going to help kids. We don't determine that based on what the union contract says are the required hours for a teacher. And I think that is a fundamental difference.
Okay, and last thing, both of you, I'd like to just have 30 seconds to a minute if you can. Boil this all down, why yes, why no on ballot question 2. You can go ahead.
This conversation truly is a distraction. It's a distraction from the conversation that really needs to happen in this state and in this country about necessary reforms to our public education system. A public education system that, particularly in urban school settings, is begging for change. But our current system inhibits that. Raising the cap and putting more charter schools is not going to solve the problem. It's just going to drain more students, resources, and inhibit the change that needs to happen in these urban schools environment. It will be an impediment to the necessary change that has to happen. Adding more schools isn't the answer.
This, at the end of the day, this is all about giving families options so that they can choose the best school for their children. And right now, there is a lack of great schools that are serving families in cities in Massachusetts. And these are public schools serving, that the data shows serves students with special needs, students that are learning English, and a very wide range of students. And this argument that they somehow drain resources is false. The vast majority of studies that have talked about this have said it does not impact what a district receives in terms of funding. So it doesn't impact funding, and it does impact kids, and I think that's the important thing.
All right, you're watching 22 News in Focus. Right after the break, we'll have our last word. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today's topic has been statewide ballot question 2 on the expansion of charter schools in Massachusetts. We hope that you've gained some information on this issue that will help you make your decision when you vote on Tuesday, November 8th. So that's our program for today, and we want to thank our guests for joining us. Thanks to you at home for watching, and remember, if you missed any of it, you can watch it in full on our website at any time at wwlp.com. From all of us here on 22 News, we wish you a wonderful Sunday.